Welcome back to Doc Shows You How. This time we're making this affordable Landspeeder, an option that isn't going to cost you $50, $60, $90, $100, $120. It is a conversion off of a toy. Let's get right to that table. So this is a blind pack for the Star Wars Doorables vehicles. Brand new, fresh on the shelf. They were $10. I eventually was able to pick some up for half that at $5. Love and hate the idea of blind packs because you don't know what you're gonna get. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That might be an interesting version of a Landspeeder. Could be built up. And then you've got Rey in there for some reason, even though she never was in a Naboo fighter. And then let's get another one here because twice as much for what another Rey. That's the problem with these blind packs. You don't know what you're getting. So you can't go out and just intentionally buy something, so it's a bit of a gamble. Fortunately, I bought a bunch of these, had a bunch of extras. We're going to modify up one of the actual Landspeeders. Love this one, love the color scheme. You see it's a good size with the figures. And that one, yeah, I think these that come up with this blind pack, if you can track them down. And you see that's a pretty good size, 3 inches this way, and another 3 or so inches that way, but we do have to process it down a little bit. So for that, we're going to do an old toy modifying trick where you do what's boil and pop, where you boil some water, put it in there, and pop these things off. Now, these wings do not socket in, you are breaking them, but having them softened with the hot water helps. To get that thing off the back, you need to pry it with a screwdriver, but it will pop off. And then you end up with a ready little Landspeeder form. Moving right along, we're going to take a couple of these wooden beads and we're going to use those to do the raised jets part there. And I didn't really have much of a plan here, just kind of started cutting material and going and figuring it out, and a little bit less measuring and a little bit more flow. And that's a fun thing to do when you can, is get yourself into a flow state and just make. I am just using cereal box and a coffee stir stick to kind of make that riser piece. And it's about here that I thought maybe if I sanded and glued these two beads together, it might be easier. I go back and forth before I finally settle on one particular way here. And I feel like a coffee stir stick on the inside was a good way to go to give it some strength.
Psst. Have you subscribed yet?
So I figured I'd have a flange on the bottom to have it sit flat, and I realized that there's just enough of a hollow. You see me clipping and trim until I finally get a bit of that coffee stir stick to fit in there, and I glue 2 in there to fill that gap. They fit so perfectly, and this is going to give me a better platform to glue those flanges down and just kind of force it all down. Let's get some good glue on there. Let's trim that level with the profile of the Landspeeder and finally get these beads together and on there as well. And just for a bit better of a bond, I think that once they're kind of on there, let's support the bottom with some baking soda. Good old modeler's trick. Always worth keeping some on hand for. Wonderful to fill gaps. And then we're going to just do a little bit of cowling on that top, kind of have it mimic the lower pieces. When that's all painted up, you'll see that it flows together pretty well. That's a design element that you may be unfamiliar with. They have this thing called repeated shape. And you repeat the same thing a few times to have a cohesion in a piece. I didn't like how weak that cardboard was, so we're just going to reinforce that with some super glue here. Let that soak in and kind of fill in that little bit of divot between the two pieces of card. This stiffens it up quite a bit, and it kind of just makes it a kind of plastic on its own. And you see that moves a little less. Let's do the actual pivot area there as well. And brads, you may have seen me use these recently in my video on making pit droids. And I thought they would make a perfect way to plug the front end of these jets and kind of, again, mimic what's already on the toy, kind of make that look cohesive and like it all meant to be together. I happen to have one of these stands on hand, and we're just going to make what I jokingly refer to as the hover plate. Just a couple chunks of foam core board here, cut down and glued on to the base, and then the ship, or in this case Landspeeder, then on that. And what this does is it lifts it off of the ground and gives it a little bit of illusion of it floating a little bit. And we need some people. I have this vintage Cowboy here, and I feel like he's going to be a good addition there. And then I also had part of an army guy left over from a previous build. In fact, that was the one where it was the rider for a swoop bike. So I got the legs used in that project and the upper torso this way. I've trimmed the arm off here because we're going to have to change its position, so just kind of figure out where you like it a little bit lower. The great thing about building with army guys is they're cheap, easy to come by, and if you mess one up too far, you probably have another one in the back to work with. Hey folks, if you want to see me scratch build a speeder, comment Landspeeder below, or if you want me to build up one of the other vehicles in this series, go ahead and comment toy.
Epoxy sculpt. 2-part putty, really until you get an even color. This stuff has a nice long pot life and is very strong after it can be sanded and machined. So once that is mixed up, we're going to roll out a coil just like we all did in grade school art. Isn't it funny that that color is almost the same as that oily clay? Once you have a coil that's about the size you like, just cut that off and see if it doesn't make a good head tail for your Twi'lek. And try to get this other one on there. And it just doesn't want to quite stay for me. And I know this other trick where we just take a little bit of super glue and literally glue it in place. That's going to hold it long enough where you can do a little bit of sculpting and shaping. Now we have it in place. Get your silicone tool and sculpt yourself a little green butt. Pretty nice. We're going to make part of a helmet now for him. Just roll yourself up a little BB. Flatten that, shape that on. Now we're going to use a straight pin to make a little antenna, give the implied function of some sort of comms unit built into his little helmet. Man, I love using zip ties on builds, just sometimes they do not fit. I thought a backpack, but nope, ended up not doing that. These painting dots, dot art, diamond art, whatever it's called in your area, I've been using them for a bunch of details recently, and I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue on this guy's visor and drop a couple of those dots to be goggles. Because, you know, nothing says aviator like goggles. We're going to mask off that windshield with some silly putty. There is expensive painter's putty you can get, but why do that? Just pick this up for a couple bucks. And that's going to protect that windshield through the base coat so that you see that it's still perfectly clear. See, and the reveal. And we're going to get on with the paint job from here. Alright folks, there's a lot of different channels that'll show you how to paint stuff, and I'm just doing it to get through here because you need to see the finished project, right? I am amused at the idea that I'm painting these green after I just painted over the green putty. And this particular guy, his chest is open, very machismo. Definitely a rebel or a pirate. Get in there and paint the goggles and the guns and I kind of decided to keep everything kind of muted and middle tone with some browns and some grays. Maybe this vehicle isn't so much a grocery getter as some sort of service vehicle. bring some burnt sienna into some of the paneling here. Makes it look more like it was a produced thing and not just one boring color. And this is again where we have some repetition. Add some black detail just to get things to pop. Kind of like the wheels on a car, the engine front mounts on these are black. And the touching details is silver, so I get my little one out here and it just is dying. And so I work on to the big one here. Sometimes you just have to go with the flow. If it's not working, it's not working. But you do see how nicely I get those in there. I'm going to move on to some chipping next. So for that, we're going to tear up a piece of sponge. I have one sponge I've been using for years and just tear it up and tear it up. Gives me a nice worn out on this vehicle, like it's been dinged up a bit and not too well loved. I'm going to switch to a makeup sponge so it gives you a different kind of texture. And the washes. It's interesting that you call it a wash when it's actually dirtying it. And then we do a little bit of a brown on the bottom to make it look like it's just dirty, and wipe some of that off too. Hey folks, if you've made it this far, I bet you've seen my videos before, and I bet you want to see my videos again. I have a long list of things I'm gonna do, and I do try to get a video out every week. I think you maybe should subscribe. Let's get a look at those glamour shots, shall we? With official models being $50 or more, this is a wonderful alternative.